Welcome to Talk South Asian to Me Season 3. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you and leave what doesn't.
Alrighty, let's get into today's podcast. We are on letter E. So, are we ready for our topic reveal?
Yes.
Today's topic is eating disorders and disordered eating. Today, we have the pleasure of having a guest on with us. It's Dr. Swathi Weaver. Dr. Swathi Weaver just graduated, so we are fully going to call her Dr. Swathi Weaver all day long.
So exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Swathi. Swathi was born and raised in Ongole, India. Swathi is a licensed professional counselor and board-approved supervisor, currently based in San Antonio, Texas. She has 10 years of experience in clinical mental health counseling. She holds a Ph.D. in Counselor Education and Supervision from UTSA, where her research focused on eating disorder risks among Indian American women. Complementing her academic work, she launched the podcast Dosas and Mimosas to explore body image and mental health stigma within the South Asian community. Swathi is currently a counselor educator at Eastern Oregon University, training master's level counseling students to become future counselors themselves. How exciting.
I just want to take a moment and just applaud you, Swathi, with all the stereotypes and barriers that you're breaking. You're representing all of this, and you're a South Asian. It's so amazing to see that you're doing this. You're breaking lots of cycles.
You. You're so sweet. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Yes.
Thank you for being on. We're so excited for today's topic and also getting to talk about it with someone who's an expert on the topic.
Yeah, it feels weird. I don't really consider myself an expert, but people have just no, you are you wrote this big old thing about it. But no, yeah, it feels weird to call myself an expert, but I guess I am.
Oh yeah. I get that. Totally get that. But also own it. You deserve it. All right. Well, first, let's kind of start off. We're dying to hear more from your own words, Swathi. If you could tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I'm Swathi. I am 34 years old. I was born in India, like you said. I've lived in Texas pretty much the majority of my life. Pretty lived here for about 25 years, and I recently moved to San Antonio 3 years ago. But before that, I've lived in Georgetown and Austin and Belton and Dallas and a lot of other places. So it kind of been all over. I like to joke that I've just been up and down the I-35 corridor. If you're from Texas, you know what that is. But yeah, I really like it here. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with a lot of things here. But yeah, I have lived in Texas for 25 years. My parents still live here. My sister lives here. My husband and I obviously live together in San Antonio. What else? I mean, you got a lot of it. I am a counselor educator and a supervisor. I supervise LPC associates in the state of Texas. I have two mini golden doodles, Dobby and Winky. They're named after Harry Potter characters. Thanks. I'm trying to convince my husband to get a third one and name him Creature, but no dice yet. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's kind of who I am, and yeah. That's me.
That's amazing. Little shout out to your husband right now. If he's listening, Dr. Swathi Weaver's husband. Let's make Creature happen.
Yes, please.
He deserves it.
Yes.
I love that.
I know. Our youngest golden doodle, I'm sorry, I talk about my dogs like they're my children, but our youngest golden doodle is just she's so quirky, and we're so lame, but we're we don't want to make her a middle child. We're we can't get her a younger sibling. Yeah, she's just we love both of them so much.
Dogs
Maybe you can convince a friend to get a dog and then name them Creature. They can be cousins.
Oh my gosh, I should. I'm pretty sure I could convince my sister-in-law, who lives half a mile from our house, to get a second dog and name it Creature. Yes, they love it.
I'm a dog person too, so it's good to hear that. I'm biased.
Yes.
Dogs are your kids. I don't know what you're talking about. They are.
Yes. For now, yes, they are definitely my children.
Okay, now we'll dive deeper into our topic, and we'd love to hear more about your thoughts and just your insights about it. So, how would you define eating disorder risk and disordered eating?
Yeah. So, I love talking about this, first of all, and I just defended my dissertation on April 11th of this year. So,
Mm,
know it's been a while, but I can spend hours talking about this. So thank you for having me on, first of all, because this is something that every time I talk about it with someone, they're always like, I had no idea. This is, yes, they resonate with it so much. And it just kind of like reinforces to me like how important it is to kind of get this message out there.
mhm,
And I just really enjoy talking about it too. I think first it's important to note that there is definitely like a difference between eating disorders and disordered eating. And a lot of people kind of equate the two, but there's it's more of like a clinical difference, so to speak. So eating disorder is a persistent disturbance of eating habits that leads to a diagnosis of an eating disorder, such as like anorexia or bulimia or binge eating disorder, which are the three most common eating disorders. There's a few other eating disorders that are not as common, so just won't speak about them today, but just know that there's like six of them total. And then disordered eating, on the other hand, is like the subclinical definition of eating disorders. And it's things that we probably do, you, me, everyone. We do it. It describes a lot of like behaviors and attitudes that are more like related to like having an ideal weight or a fear of gaining weight or connecting your self-worth related to your diet and your weight or having like rigid exercise routines. And I'm sure you've heard the term like diet culture. So
mhm,
disordered eating is sort of like wrapped up in diet culture. So it's stuff like, with the holidays coming up, that's stuff like I need to go run 4 miles to burn off this turkey that I'm about to eat. Oh my gosh, I had 4 Snickers bars with my Halloween candy. I'm going to go for a run, or I need to be on the Stairmaster. It's things like, oh, I've been really, really good today, so I'm going to have a piece of cake with dinner. Or even using a term like, I'm eating really clean this week. It's stuff like that that's what we consider like disordered eating behaviors or disordered eating attitudes. And a lot of people may engage in those, myself included, without even realizing that we are
mhm,
engaging in it because it is feeding into diet culture this diet culture.
mhm.
That's pretty much it. So just wanted to kind of clarify like the difference between the two because I think that in itself is just so important to talk about. And for your question, to answer your question, eating disorder risk specifically talks about like the factors that could increase the risk of developing these behaviors. So some of the things that I studied that were important to me to study, there's so many factors out there that can increase your eating disorder risk, but I studied things like age, immigrant status, generational status, religious commitment, and this fun term called self-objectification. So those are sort of the things that like I studied in my research about how they could be affecting eating disorder risk within American women living in America that descend from India.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much for like breaking down those definitions. Can you tell us a little bit more about like the dissertation that you recently defended and like what were your findings? Like in a nutshell, if you had to give us the highlights, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I ran a quantitative study, which means like survey design, basically. I sent this out to a bunch of people, posted on like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And then, of course, like my mom sent it to all of her friends in every single WhatsApp group that she's in. So the reason I mentioned that is because I ended up getting a lot of participants. I had 169 participants in the study. And I guess like I don't want to say unfortunately, a lot of the participants were older. The skewness led to like an average age of my participants to be almost 40 years old. So all the data that I'm going to talk about today and all like the results I'm going to talk about today, just to keep that in mind, is out of these 169, the average age was 39 years old.
Mhm,
Most people were United States citizens, and most people were born in India. So it was kind of like this like distinction between United States citizens, but then also like, where were you born? So these are just like questions that I asked my participants that they answered. So what I did was like, I asked them questions about their eating habits. There was like a survey that they took. I asked them questions about their religious commitment. That was also a survey that they took. And then I asked questions about self-objectification. And I can get into that term a little bit after I talk about the results a little bit too. So there was like 3 different surveys that everybody took, and I ran some analyses, which I won't get into. And I got some pretty like significant results, statistically significant results, which was really cool. What I found was that the higher the commitment that someone had to their religion, and these are things like you read about your religion, you engage in a community with your religion, you go to a place of worship, you practice your religion, you want to learn more about your religion, you donate money to your religious your religion, things like that. The people that had a higher score on that assessment could predict their higher score on the eating disorder. The eating attitudes test is what it's called. So their eating disorder risk, basically. It was really interesting to see that their score on the religious commitment inventory could predict their score on the eating attitudes test, which was the eating disorder risk. So there was a lot of like literature that I read too about how religion can be a protective factor and also a risk factor for eating disorders. So it's all about like how you practice the religion and what you believe and how you let that influence your dietary practices that could be leading to this disordered eating or eating disorder risk. The other thing that was statistically significant was the self-objectification. So objectification theory is something that has been around for almost 30 years. It was created by Fredrickson and Roberts in 1997. And what they said is originally it was a study ran only for white women, white heterosexual women. Since then, objectification theory has been replicated so many times across the span of all genders and most cultures, and most sexual orientations as well. And it's been shown that we often behave in a certain way based on how we think other people perceive us. So it's examples like why I decided to wear my hair in a bun, or why I have these earrings on, why I put on this dress. It's because I would like for you guys to perceive me as a professional. I didn't show up to this podcast in like sweats and a messy bun or something like that. So that's what self-objectification is. It's how we alter what we do, what we wear, what we say, to what we think other people perceive about us. So the reason I'm saying all of this is because my participants also showed that if they have a higher self-objectification score, that also predicted eating disorder risk. And that was really significant to me because there's a lot of studies that also show that self-objectification is directly related to eating disorders, based on like the fact that, if you perceive me as this body type, then I'm going to do things that reinforce that body type. So, let's say that everyone calls me skinny all the time. So that in turn might lead to me engaging in behaviors that keep me skinny or whatever that means. So yeah, so those were like the 2 really big findings. The statistically significant findings was that religious commitment and self-objectification were able to predict someone's score on the eating disorder, and eating attitudes test, which is, eating disorder risk. Thank you.
Were you able to kind of, I know this was probably not part of your study maybe, but like speculate or kind of explore the reasoning, especially the reasoning behind the religious commitment and community engagement being highly correlated with eating disorder risk? Like I'm curious I wonder if you've explored or thought about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up Hindu, and I still practice some Hindu rituals and traits. I don't regularly go to the temple or anything like that. I can only speak from like the Hindu experience. I can't speak from the other religions of India. I will say, like, out of my sample, there was primarily Hindu participants, and then I had also a large number of Islamic participants and then some Christian participants. Unfortunately, I had one Sikh person. I didn't have any Buddhists or Jain or anything like that. So, what I'm about to say is like mostly primarily Hindu participants, which, it does reflect the proportion of the number of Hindus in India and Indian Americans. This is just like a theory. It's just we have dietary practices within all religions of India, but specifically within Hinduism, fasting practices or
Mhm.
being related to like piousness, which then gets kind of taken to like this extreme of okay, growing up, like we used to fast on Thursdays because it was related to a certain god that we worshiped to on Thursdays, and we would just would not eat until after we had worshipped at the end of the day. And then it turned into, oh, we're going to do it Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then, it could warp into, oh, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and it's like, well, what's the purpose of this? And I think that is kind of what we need to talk about is the purpose and the intent behind it is, and this is all just me speculating. This is not like rooted in any research. But I'm just asking, like, what's the purpose of this? What's the intent behind your fasting?
Right.
And that's just like the one example that comes to mind for me is, are you doing this to equate this to piousness, or are you doing this because one time that you fasted, you kind of felt less inflamed the next day, and it
Yeah.
felt good. And then now you want to continue that.
Wow. I love that
Yeah.
perspective. I mean, immediately when you said that, like, what is the intention really behind this? I was thinking about examples of like for example, when we have like those kinds of fasting days, particularly I'm thinking of specifically one for like Shivaratri, for example, when we fast for that, the reason behind it. Sometimes I have heard people say, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it. I'm talking about particularly like maybe people of like my generation that I've heard personally say it, who are like Indian Americans, and like they've come at it from this place of, well, I'm just going to do it because even though I don't believe in what we're doing here, like the cultural significance, just be good for my body to just take a break, not from a place of maybe like detox type of a place, but more so just like, hey, here's a good excuse for me to just not eat. And that'll
Mhm.
maybe help me with losing weight or like whatever, what have you. So, oh my goodness, like the intention behind some of these things and how, yeah, like how religion and like how we interpret some of these things, what we attribute
Mhm.
to it, the values we assign to it, so important. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
I'm blown away.
And it also, like, you bring up a good point of like, there are even some dietary practices, even in Hinduism or in Islamic practices too, is like that's women only. Men don't always engage in the same fasting practices that women do too. So that's important to consider as well. And that's just like a little side comment. And of course, like my
Mhm.
entire sample in my dissertation was women, so I have no data for men, but just
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great
no,
point.
it's very fascinating. Yeah, it's something that I can like it's not obvious, but it's like, oh, it makes sense, but you don't really think about it, which is, it's very eye-opening. There you go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
kind
not to
of
mention, like, I mean, I'm gonna go there, okay? Like, it takes me to that like patriarchal side of it. Like lately, I was discussing this with a client actually. She was the one who brought it up. We were discussing this quote that's been floating around social media around how it's like a very patriarchal thing, wanting women to be underfed and overworked because then they don't have the energy to be aware of what's happening around them, to
Mhm.
fight back, to be empowered. And so, like, I'm not saying that's what this is, but like, it's giving a lot of those like
Mhm.
feels, of like, yeah, why is it that maybe this was more encouraged to be like a gendered thing? Like, why do some women?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Why aren't men like encouraged to do it? Just fascinating, just
Mhm.
mic drop
Yeah.
moment, just putting it out there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I've got theories and yeah, we could totally go there too. But yeah, and it's usually like to me, from my personal experiences, I've also seen it like related to like obedience from like
Mhm.
religious leaders too, and sometimes just like not questioning like being told to fast or being told when to fast or, things like that is that also makes me think like, oh yeah, that's very like patriarchal and related to like subordination and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's lots of layers,
Yeah,
definitely.
and Michelle, you like made a good point about you were saying like it makes sense. Like it's not
Mhm.
surprising, but it's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And I think like that is like diet culture in and of itself. Like the
Mhm.
more people learn about diet culture, they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I can't believe like I was kind of just like living this narrative in this life without even realizing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. Very eye-opening. You kind of dove into this a little bit, but I kind of want to hear more of your thoughts, generally speaking, too, not just related to religion, but in your time with like studying the Indian American woman, like in your dissertation, but also in your work with South Asian clients, what unique cultural and societal messages and norms have you observed play into their relationship with food, weight, body image?
Yeah, I think it was just really interesting to me, like on my podcast with like each guest that I had, there's like
Mm-hmm.
this term that we use in like qualitative research called saturation. And what saturation means is it's like when you start to hear kind of the same things from the
Mm-hmm.
participants that you're interviewing. And I started to kind of see that with the participants, or sorry, not the participants, the guests that I had on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We were all saying the same things, and some of those things are like what you asked is what were the societal norms, what were the cultural things that South Asians were experiencing about body image. Unfortunately, it's things like having to maintain a thin body ideal,
Mm-hmm.
especially for single women, having to like
Mm-hmm.
be this certain body type before you get married, or if you weren't that certain body type before you got married, pressure to get skinny for your wedding, like fat shaming constantly if you were growing up in a bigger body. That was something that, my guests talked about as well. Other people talking about your body. That was a huge one. That's a term that I talk about in my study as well. It's a term called body surveillance. It's
Mm-hmm.
when other people are surveilling our bodies. And in turn, that leads to self objectification when we then act a certain way because we know there's
Right.
people watching our bodies. And in the South Asian culture, this
Mm-hmm.
was kind of common with a lot of people that I was talking to as well, is just we know that there's always an auntie looking at us
Mm-hmm.
and like just waiting to say something to either
Mm-hmm.
us straight up or to their friends, and then they can just talk about
Mm-hmm.
it. So I
Yeah.
think like those are some of the biggest things that stand out to me, is like the body surveillance and this thin ideal, especially for like single women too.
Yeah.
Those kind of things really do tend towards a higher eating disorder risk or disordered eating behaviors as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you're right. There's just so much, just like media, societal expectations, norms, right? Like people's, like the aunties. Every time this brings comes up, like, I have personally experienced that as well. Like just a casual, like I know our last episode that we talked about it was like casual commentary, right, Anusha? Like
Yeah.
just like at family gatherings, they're just coming up to
Mhm.
you and being like, oh, like how much more are you gonna fill your plate? You know what I mean? Like things like that, like casual commentary,
Mhm.
which in turn, you're right, it is directly related, I think, to the objectification. Is that right? Saying
Yeah.
that right? um, which makes sense, right? You're like, oh, like I'm being perceived this way. I do not want to be perceived this way, so I'm going to change my behavior, and that behavior could lead to eating disorder risk, right? Like so,
Yeah,
yeah, it's very
absolutely.
fascinating.
I think one of the other things that I've noticed too, and kind of just like through my reading and stuff too, is like people saying like how confusing it can be in, especially in a South Asian culture, that where food is such an integral part of like how we connect
Mm-hmm.
with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you guys, but my dad, like growing up, like if we ever had a party or if we ever had a get together, like even at my wedding or my sister's wedding, it was like food was like the most
Mm-hmm.
important thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
if the food is bad, that's all people are going
Yeah.
to talk about, kind of
Oh,
thing,
yeah. Exactly.
in a culture where like the food is so like central to what we do. There's also like really confusing messages about it too. it's
Wow.
it's it's almost like damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Mm-hmm. Double-edged sword.
Yeah, like when you're saying like, oh, how much are you going to fill your plate? But then if you don't try everything, then they're like, oh, you didn't like, yeah, why
Mm-hmm.
aren't you eating? Or like, oh,
You
you
didn't
didn't
like
like
it.
this. Or if you go to someone's house and you don't accept, like, let's say a sweet that they give you, it's like, oh, well, I made this, or they feel offended. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's also like really, really confusing too. It's like, well, do you want me to eat or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's like that push and pull of just
Mhm.
you can't win.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have something to say about it regardless. And either way,
Mhm.
whatever they say, risk factors, not great for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah, there are so many other risk factors I want to study, but
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you hit like the first layer of it all, right? Like it's a very, to use a term I learned from you, a very saturation led point. And speaking of, like all of these like mixed messages and everything, like it starts young because like you said, they're so embedded within our culture of like community, food, those just go hand in hand, like food is
Mm-hmm.
equated to like warmth and like it's just very, I don't even I can't even think of the word other than like just home, right? Like when
Mhm.
I think of cultural food and like just South Asian food in general, I think of like warm feelings, fuzzy feelings, home. But then it comes with all of these extra like baggage of like it's not simply just food. There's a lot of things tied to it, other people's
Mm-hmm.
commentary. So, it starts quite young. And I'm wondering like what are some of the norms and like messages and maybe even like other risk factors that influence young girls in particular into
Yeah.
developing these eating disorders or even like just disordered eating?
Yeah, you ask a really good question um, like I said, like in my sample, like I can't answer a lot just because like my sample was so skewed to be like 39 years old. But I really, really wish I had gotten a lot of like Gen Zers and Gen Alpha to come take my survey. I just don't know how to like tap that market, I guess. But like a lot of things, you're right, do start at home. Age is shown to be significantly correlated to eating disorder risk, especially in the teenage years. To no one's
Mm-hmm.
surprise, a teenage girl is constantly told by media, by TV shows, movies, friends, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, is like what she should look like. All these, don't get me started on this fit check madness, like all
Mm-hmm.
of this. So I think the message does start at home. To get back to it, because age is so significantly correlated to an eating disorder risk, with the lower age being related to a higher eating disorder risk, it's important to talk about like the messages that you're sending your kids at home. And I am by no means a child counselor or an adolescent counselor, but I do know that talking about your weight as a negative thing in front of children can have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about dieting constantly can have an impact on children.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about excessive exercise to replace a donut you ate can have an impact. It sends a message that donuts are, not meant to be enjoyed. They result in punishing your body. Talking about exercise as if it were punishment, that's a message that we need to be careful about sending
Mm-hmm.
adolescents. Those are all things that I think can really impact younger generations and especially teenage girls too.
Yeah.
Just this whole message that your not body needs to look a certain way is, I
Yeah.
always love this term, and sometimes I'll use this as kind of like a mantra to say to myself too, is like, you can't hate yourself into a body you love.
Mm-hmm.
And you just can't, like, you can't hate your body into a body you're going to love. So talking about your body negatively is not going to lead to better self-image or a better body image. Talking about your body because it houses you, it lets you breathe, it lets you live, it functions so
Mm-hmm.
many things for you, and being grateful for that leads to a body that you're going to love. I just hope that like parents are passing those messages on to kids,
Right.
let's talk about what our body can do, not what our body looks like.
Mm-hmm. I love that. What it
Never have I
can
ever
do.
heard that, but I
Yeah.
wish that that was more common.
Yes. Yes. And
Mhm.
I would really make a really good point about modeling behaviors at home because it makes a big impact on a child's development. Is like, are you modeling, a positive body image and focusing on what your body can do and not what your body looks like? And, to be fair, also, I feel that even sometimes parents, caregivers, aunts, uncles, they're also kind of modeling the behaviors of disordered eating, right? And then making comments also to kids like, oh, like you need to do this, you need to do that. Or, you know, I feel like these aunties comments don't like start pretty early. Like
Mm.
they
Mhm.
don't discriminate by age. They
Mhm.
just say it all when
Especially
they,
things like you look healthier
oh
today.
yes, the word
Mhm.
healthy. This is what they do, healthy.
You look really healthy. I was like, oh, good
Like with
thought.
for our listeners on audio, I'm putting my fists out and like around my body. Like that's what they do. It's like healthy. And I heard that literally 2 days ago. I was
No,
like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, like somebody talking about someone else, and I was like, that's not healthy. Like That's
That's
normal,
not healthy. It's not
Yes,
healthy.
yes, yes.
I know.
Gosh.
I
And
would love to hear more about, like what your experiences are with
yeah,
parents modeling like poor eating behavior.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely like modeling is something I like learned in school very early that it makes a big difference. And then also like something that this is might not be just limited to the South Asian culture, but like society in general, like how is the body represented in play, like toys, like Barbie dolls, right? Like now today, like
Mhm.
things are better, like we're moving in the right direction. But when I was growing up, I was playing with all skinny white Barbies. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
or there was not much diversity in the beauty standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're still not there yet, but we are moving in the right direction. But that makes a big difference too, is like what toys, what types of activities and
Mhm.
toys, what kind of pictures and toys is your child exposed to, and how is that building a standard for them?
Absolutely. And yeah, you're right. Like representation matters so much. And
Hmm.
we are definitely moving in the right direction. And, I really hope that like my study helps with that too. That's
Yeah,
one of the reasons I decided to study like Indian American women specifically, is because there
yeah,
was nothing out there. There's been like a handful, maybe, studies of like South Asian women in general, specifically with some qualitative studies that were done,
yeah,
but there was nothing for like Indian Americans. And I was like, well, we need to see that there are people, and guess what? Now I have proof that there
yeah,
are people in our communities that are living with a really high eating disorder risk.
yeah,
Of course, I can't like diagnose any of my participants because they're all
yeah,
anonymous, but I can see in the data that their scores are
yeah.
really, really high. Like this is in
Mhm.
our communities. This is just a survey that they answered anonymously, so it could actually even be more.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It was a
Well, I
great
really, really
contribution.
appreciate you calling that out. I mean, because it's so important. Like, Michelle and I usually like to have some kind of like research component for our work. And like, this is something we hit up against all the time.
Hmm.
There's just not enough research out there for our communities in general about
Hmm.
most of these mental health topics that are so important, or even like physical health topics. Like,
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're all basically living with a different standard that does not maybe even apply to our bodies. And like, how can we get the kind of care we deserve that we need if there's no
yeah.
research? So I really appreciate like your work, and I really
Hmm.
do hope like, yeah, it's seen by more people. It's impacting and like creating more awareness. And I look forward to maybe
Hmm.
any other kind of research you put out there. We'll follow you along that
Yes,
journey.
My
you
gosh.
you
Yeah. I
built
need
you're
to take a
building a
little break, but
legacy. You left a legacy
Fair
for
enough.
people to continue to build on and continue to work
yeah.
with, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's my hope, is that,
Yeah,
some other Indian researcher also comes along and,
Yeah.
hey, if anyone's listening, let's collaborate. I don't want to do another
yeah.
study by myself. It was a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it can go, because that's one of the things that I even talked about in my dissertation, is it might not even be diagnosing correctly, because
Hmm.
our standards as South Asians look very different than the diagnostic assessments that are used to even diagnose eating disorders.
Hmm.
Some of the things on there may just not be relevant to our culture, and so maybe we need another assessment. I'm not saying
Yeah.
there's like thousands out there, but
That'd be
yeah,
ideal, right? Like I feel like that's
yeah.
something that we're realizing in a lot of standardized
Mhm.
tests and assessments,
Mhm.
that they were pretty
Yeah.
practically created with a certain group that's not
Mhm.
representative of the rest of the of diverse cultures and diverse people.
Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of hit on this a little bit, but we wanted to go deeper into it and wanted to hear more of your thoughts about this. Is that what are some lesser known or invisible ways disordered eating can show up, especially in the South Asian community?
Yeah, so some of the ways that I think it shows up is it's almost like really sneaky. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the terms like someone I follow on Instagram uses about diet culture, is that like it's really sneaky. And I think that's true even in South Asian culture. It's stuff that like we've talked about already today. It's like normal conversations, like Anusha was saying with her friend, that says like, I should just fast just 'cause, it'll make me feel good. I'm like, but what do you mean it'll make you feel good? Because
Mhm.
when I don't eat for 4 hours, I get hungry. That doesn't feel good to me, you know? So like let's be intentional with like what you mean by that. It's like or saying things like, you know, I can't have this, oh, I had too much already, or I can't have even more of a certain food. Refusing food can be like really offensive. So then it leads to like some sort of like binge, not a binge, but some sort of like overconsumption of a type
Mm-hmm.
of food. I think that's a way that disordered eating could show up too, is saying yes to eating something repetitively, even after
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of determined, like, I'm full, just to avoid uncomfortable feelings.
Right.
Like that's like one of like a personal example. I want to say there's this like one time where my husband, we were in India and my husband was served like this eggplant dish that he just absolutely loves. And he was so full, but like my aunt just kept offering it to him and he just kept saying yes. And I like, my husband's white, he's not, but I was just at the end of the day, I was like, wow, you like could have just said no. And he was like, no, I can't. Like your aunt would have been so offended. And I was like, yeah, you're actually right. Like I think she would have been really offended. And I think like that's one of the ways that it can like very subtly show up in like
Mm-hmm.
behaviors like that. I think some of another like lesser known way that it could show up is just like casual conversations that we have with each other that sort of like um
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate diet culture. So I don't know about you guys, but anytime somebody goes to India, you know, for like a month or a week or 2 weeks or whatever time, they always come back. And but the majority of people that come back will complain about like gaining weight or like having to like fix something in their diet to like get them back to normal, you know, those sorts of conversations that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're so normalized that it's like, oh, yes, of course. Like when we go to India, like we do eat a lot of food that we don't typically eat on a day-to-day basis. And of course, it's natural for our bodies to kind of like
Mm-hmm.
when we do that, but like your body will eventually reset. But anyway, that's a side note. But like it's like those are the sort of ways it's like, but you're actually perpetuating restrictive eating because by saying, oh, I need to lose the 5 pounds that I gained, what you're saying is like, I don't like this. Really like digging into like why you don't like it would be good, but I don't think we're there yet as a community.
Yeah.
Just like that's like oh like a more like invisible or lesser way that we get to do it. And I think like those are the sort of things that I talk about is like diet culture is everywhere and like disordered eating is kind of everywhere. And even like when people will try to cut out like white rice, we grew up eating white rice, you know, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cultures in India like used to eat white rice 3 times a day. Now we've switched over to like quinoa and brown rice and millets and oats and like all these other things. Are we really doing this for health reasons, or are you doing this because somebody told you carbs were bad and white rice is bad and you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to lose weight? So I remember like once upon a time, yes, people were like switching over to like whole grains or brown rice to lose weight. But like now it's almost like we've demonized white rice in our own communities sometimes. And it's like, guys, like this is what we grew up on. Like
Mm-hmm.
our ancestry is rooted in white rice. Like our genes are used to us eating white rice. It's
Yeah.
just stuff like that.
That's a really, really fascinating point. You know,
Mm-hmm.
recently, Michelle knows this. Recently, I've been on a bit of a like health complication type journey right now. So I've been talking with a lot of like medical professionals, and this comes up a lot, right? Like the idea of, and just like in health and wellness, like influencer type, you know, propaganda, you know, a lot of this idea of like, yeah, like white rice is bad and like carbs are bad and like, you know, oh, you just need like 30 grams of carbs in a day, like just across the bucket for everybody. And it's like, whoa, there is definitely something to be said, right? Like we can be aware of like how most South Asian communities, and I think also maybe it's not a stretch to say like Black and brown communities in general too, like we do have a higher risk for things like diabetes and like cholesterol. Like there are definitely ties to the kinds of carbs that we consume and all of that. And like rice even. Like it makes sense from a medical standpoint. But also like just the general idea of like just cut it out for like everybody like in mass. And like it's like I want to highlight what you're saying specifically, right? Is like the intention behind it. Is this something you're genuinely doing for your health because you have a history, you're concerned about it, your doctor and you are working on it? Or is it just something you're doing because you're falling into the propaganda trap of wellness culture?
Yeah, it's like yeah, like sure, let's switch it up sometimes and eat tortillas or eat brown rice or eat millets or eat, insert carb that isn't white rice here. But you're right, like the intent behind it, is it because I want it and I want to eat it and like my body's asking for it? Or are we doing it because you had white rice 2 days in a row and you feel weird eating it a third day in a row? You
Guilt,
know,
shame. Yeah.
The
yeah, yeah.
self-objectification is coming into play.
We're learning.
I'm picking up. That's
Yeah.
what it is, right?
Such an
Like,
educational episode.
there you go. I'm applying what I
Yeah.
learned from you.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, in the same kind of thought about like intention and all of that, I want to talk about something else that tends to show up a lot, right? So, perfectionism, right? We are no stranger to perfectionism as South Asians, high achievers over here. But I want to know from your perspective, how does like perfectionism and even like control, how do those things play into food and body image struggles?
Yeah, perfectionism never met her. Just kidding. A lot is the short answer to that, is also highly correlated to eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors. None of the studies, of course, talk about South Asian perfectionism or Indian American perfectionism or anything like that. But I have seen lots of research out there that says that perfectionist tendencies can lead to a higher eating disorder risks. Things like, because there is like this need for control with perfectionist tendencies, right? And eating is generally something that we can control ourselves, especially as adults. As adolescents and teens, eating is a lot of the times like out of our control, just based on like what we're served, to eat and things like that. But as adults, if you do live with a tendency to control things or a tendency to have perfectionist personality, then just know that that could be slipping over into your eating habits and your eating attitudes. Also, like if you are someone who is a chronic dieter or you like to engage in different diets, one after the other, or several diets, in a year or whatever, and you also have perfectionist tendencies, like that can lead to like a lot of like black or white thinking, which it's just like this snowballs into like a lot of really negative headspace for yourself of like diets don't work, first of all, and diets aren't perfect. The perfectionism can really alter your own self-worth if you do end up like breaking a diet or something like that. So all that to say, like, if you are someone who has perfectionist tendencies or you know someone who is, and then also struggles with disordered eating, there's a really high risk of developing an eating disorder. And add into that, if you have like additional life stressors, that can also lead to that.
Yeah.
Adolescents, a lot of like adolescents with perfectionist tendencies has been shown to use food as a way to control what's going on in their life because they often don't feel control in any other aspect of their life.
Yeah.
So by being able to either binge or engage in bulimic behaviors or restrict their food, that's a sense of control. I'm keeping food from entering, or I'm releasing food, or I am intaking lots of food. Those are all things that you control. So there's sometimes like a sense of control that's experienced in engaging in those eating disorder behaviors that then sort of just perpetuates, especially when they have a loss of control in other aspects of their life as well. And this is specific to like teenage girls too. And I worry, you're right, as South Asians, like we do have perfectionist tendencies. And I do worry that that can lead to lots of disordered eating and eating disorders in our communities, especially with like, I don't know about you guys, but I was raised like really strict parents and with really high expectations. And that sort of stuff like is really stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And it does lead to a loss of control and a loss of like sense of self too. And engaging in dieting behaviors or disordered eating can be a way to reclaim control, which can then just be like a very dangerous slippery slope too.
Yeah. Yeah. So many factors for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, leading to more factors, right? What are some common beliefs or self-sabotaging behaviors you notice in your work, with your clients or, what you studied? Maybe some common guilt and shame narratives that you've heard. Um, any thoughts on that?
Common beliefs that I have seen so far, honestly, is that it doesn't exist. in our communities, or that eating disorders are not a South Asian problem or not an Indian
It's
problem.
non-existent.
It's non-existent. So it's like it's hard to say, like, I don't know what the common beliefs are because people aren't even admitting that it's a factor in, or if it's a risk factor in our communities. And I think that also, like, going back to what we said about education, is also like we really do need to talk about it more. It's like how to recognize these factors, or I'm sorry, these symptoms in our communities, so that we can say, like, hey, I also experienced this, or do we need to get some help, or offering help. I think that's like the first step to
Mm-hmm.
even recognizing what the patterns are. But a common belief then could also be like, I didn't know this existed among other people.
Mm-hmm.
I had a portion of my dissertation where it was an open-ended question, and it wasn't anything related to my research questions, and it wasn't anything related to like my hypotheses or anything. It was just a question I asked, and it was open text answer. And I think like 15% of my participants answered this question, and it broke my heart. And that some of the beliefs that were like listed on there is that, I must have this type of body, or I have to look a certain way, or I have to engage in these behaviors. These were ingrained in me as a child, of being a certain weight, or eating a certain way, exercising in a certain way. It was just like all these things that just sort of like broke your heart
Yeah.
about what we think about, like, assigning like our worth to our body size.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
really disheartening. But
Mm.
like, I love that these people felt open enough to like share their narratives with you, which is great. I kind of gave you a little lens into your participants' thoughts and
Yeah,
beliefs. Yeah.
it did. Like it normalized a lot for me too. And like I'm like, "Ah, I need to do something with this." Like I know that like when I
Mm-hmm.
first read everything that they had written, I honestly had to just sort of step away and just have a really good cry and like come back to it. It's
Yeah.
like these are human beings that are saying that they have been struggling with this, and they recognize that this is not in our communities yet, or like as recognized a as an illness in our communities yet, like an eating disorder, or that our community doesn't see how eating can be
Yeah.
disordered. It's just something that we do, right? But there are people out there. So if there's anyone listening that is, living with disordered eating behaviors, there's people out there.
Yeah. And it's very eye-opening to hear this and then also know that your median age is like 39, 40. Just to like,
Yeah,
this is not a, uncommon experience even for older women in the South Asian community, specifically Indian American women.
exactly. Yeah, you're
Yeah, that's
absolutely
a
right.
really great point, right? Because usually in this context, we're talking about like younger women, like
Mhm.
maybe high school, maybe
Adolescents,
even middle school, maybe like
young adults.
college, but
Yeah.
like yeah, like it's still pervasive. It doesn't just like go away, right? You grow up
Mhm.
hearing these things and it really sets into stone almost. At least it
Hmm.
feels like that.
Mhm.
Wow. That is so heartbreaking to like just like know that these are people's experiences, but then to feel like there's a space and then they're talking about, I mean, honestly, their trauma around this. And then to have this like open box and then just be able to like
Mm.
let some of it out, like, oh, that must have been quite an exhausting experience for them, but also for you to like hold space for that, even though they're not there. Like you're reading these very vulnerable, raw stories. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think like as a counselor, that's what was hard for me, is like reading these like incredibly vulnerable things, and then like not having a place to like validate or like reflect back to
Yeah.
them, or like
Hmm.
be there for them. It was like, oh my gosh, like this is somebody that just put this into a box, and then
Mm.
like I can't do anything about it because it's all
Yeah.
anonymous.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
are
that's a
doing
really great
something about
point.
it.
Yes,
That's
like
what you're
that's my
doing. Like you're
hope.
speaking on
Yeah.
this podcast and other ways, in other
Yes.
ways.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
speaking of, that actually reminds me, like I was mentioning, Swathi, I listened to one of your episodes on your Dosas and Mimosas podcast, and you were actually talking about, you got vulnerable yourself, and this was your friend interviewing you, and you
Mhm.
were talking about like how it's so important to like unlearn diet culture, and it takes
Hmm.
time, right? Like you were talking about it taking like a year or so for you to like really like feel more comfortable with unlearning diet culture, feel like you can really own that. And you were talking about these really great examples too, which maybe you can talk a little bit to that too, like of like what are some of the things that you would say are like tips that maybe you've done for yourself in unlearning and or advocated for other people to try to unlearn. But the one that stood out to me at least was, and really, really cool, I want to share. I was actually speaking with a client the other day after I had listened to your podcast. We just happened to be talking about disordered eating things. And I referenced you. I said, oh my gosh, heard a wonderful therapist and she was talking about the topic. And so I kind of like nodded to this episode where you talk about it like showing up in things like picture taking, right? Like diet culture and like
Mhm.
disordered eating, like subtle things around, oh, like let's take another picture. I don't look good in that. Oh, take it at this angle. I look better at this angle. And like something that you had said that I was like, yeah, why don't more of us do that? You were like, I was just kind of like, it's not going to change if I ask to see that picture. The picture is still going to exist unless I choose to delete it. That doesn't serve, us to do that. It doesn't serve me breaking away from diet culture. I don't need to ask. They take a picture, cool. They post it, cool. It's not going to change the way I look. That's fine. And I was like, that's so simple and so profound. And yet most of us don't really do that. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Are there other things like that that you feel comfortable kind of sharing, like things that you've done or things you've advocated for others to do?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. It's really meaningful to me. I appreciate that. And well, as you were speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I say? I don't remember. But then you shared the example, so that was great. And you're right, like I still I try really hard not to. I'm trying to think like, I just recently had a photographer take like family pictures and yeah, I love her and she's great, but she was like showing me like some of the pictures and I was like, you're good. Like that's just what I look like. Like we're not going to change that. And you're right. Like that to reference like kind of that podcast episode is like that is rooted in diet culture because like what did we do before digital photos? We waited 2 weeks for those photos to be printed at CVS or Walgreens,
Yeah.
and then we just dealt with it like whatever we looked like. So it's like this like instant gratification of looking a certain way is diet
Yeah.
culture. It is saying I need to look a certain way in order to be perceived
Mm-hmm.
in a certain way so that people will like my picture, so that I get this little
Yeah.
dopamine hit from my, an extra like on Instagram or something like that. Which don't get me wrong, I get excited when my posts get a lot of likes on Instagram too. I think that is a very natural thing to do, but it's just one of those things that it's just like really having to unlearn. Like I have a good side, I do, but sometimes it's okay if I'm not always on my good
Yeah.
side. And that was a level of perfectionism I just had to kind of unlearn.
Yeah.
Lately, something that I've been doing to sort of unlearn diet culture has been, and I might have mentioned this in a previous episode too, is like I love coffee and I love just trying new coffee shops in San Antonio. I just enjoy just going out for like an afternoon coffee. Love, love, love coffee. But I noticed there was a few years long time ago, like maybe 5 or so years ago, where I would always get like alternative milks. And it was me getting like almond milk or oat milk when oat milk started becoming a thing. I'm allergic to soy, so I don't have soy. But just getting like alternative milks for stuff or getting things like half sweet. And like eventually this is like me like looking back, right? Like I would try to like convince myself that I liked it and that it tasted good. Lately, in like the last 2, 3 years, I've just sort of just been like, no, I like the taste of dairy. I just
Mm-hmm.
do. I'm sorry for any vegans out there that are listening, but I enjoy the taste of like milk. And I enjoy the taste of vanilla syrup instead of like half syrup, half sweet. It's like, what was the purpose of me asking for it half sweet? Well, it's because I wanted half the calories. And it's like little things like that. It's like when we ask for things to be altered from like the form that they're supposed to be in, is like, are you doing it because you prefer that taste? Which is fine. I'm not going to yuck
Mm-hmm.
anybody's yum. If that's what you want, that's what you want. But it's like, why are you doing that? And like, if you just
Yeah.
pause to ask yourself about decisions that you're making around your eating, I think it can really highlight a lot about like your habits and your attitudes and your eating behaviors. So now
That's
I always just have a regular vanilla latte.
Yum. That's such a good tip, I think. And that can be very impactful. It's just let's like, when you're acting on these, thoughts and doing these behaviors, like take a second before you act on that behavior and say, okay, what's the intent behind this? Why am I doing
Mhm.
this? Is it because, like you said, is it because it's my preference and makes me happy? Or is it because I'm trying to be something I'm not, or I'm wanting others to perceive me a certain way, and that's why I'm doing this, which is really great. I feel
Yeah.
like I could use that tip myself. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we're just down to our like last couple of questions. So, what would you say to a South Asian woman who's silently struggling with food and body image, but doubts whether it's serious enough, in quotes, to deserve support?
I guess like I talked about this a little bit earlier, is like the biggest thing is you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's way more common than you think, and I literally have proof for you. Come talk to
There you
me.
go.
I will send you the PDF. We can have this conversation all over
Yeah.
again. Is that it can feel alone because our community does have such a lack of awareness and a lack of education about the fact that eating behaviors could be disordered, that
Yeah.
that's even a possibility. So then when you are struggling with it, you might even gaslight yourself into thinking, well, what is this? Like, is this real? Am I, being dramatic? Am I overthinking this? This isn't a problem. It's not that bad. All these things might be going through your head. And I think it's important to know that it's not in your head and
Mm-hmm.
it is real. And there are lots of other women out there that are living with disordered eating in our culture,
Yeah.
who are probably thinking the exact same thing, and feeling pretty alone. I would also say that, I think everybody should go to counseling, not just,
Yes.
somebody struggling with something, yay. But finding a South Asian counselor, to talk to. If you're in the state of Texas, hit up Anusha, whoever you've got is um, most counselors practice within their state. So just hit up a South Asian counselor if you can
Yeah.
find a counselor that's from like your community of like the nation you identify with, maybe the language that you speak. That would be even better
Mm-hmm.
because ethnic matching has been shown to improve counseling outcomes.
Mm-hmm. I'm a product of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great, right?
I've done my therapist of 2+ years now. She's a South Asian, and it's so amazing. Like,
Yes, it is.
sorry,
It's no, no,
She's
no,
a
it's
walking
okay.
advertisement for therapy.
I
It's
am.
wonderful. It's wonderful. Yes, counseling is wonderful. No, it's just like it's way more common than you think, and it doesn't have to be serious to go get help. You can be perfectly fine. And by the way, newsflash, no one is perfectly fine,
Mm-hmm.
and go to counseling.
Everybody
It's
can benefit from it. Mm-hmm.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I also really want to add in one piece that comes to mind. And we didn't hit on it at all, which is a surprise to me that it didn't come up naturally for any of us yet. But I'm going to bring it up right now. Body positivity, right? Like,
Mhm.
I personally find that with my clients who, when we talk about this stuff, and like majority of my clients are South Asians, we tend to like talk about body positivity being like out in the norm and like some of their kind of belief systems around like disordered eating and everything. And it always comes up from a place of like almost like guilt or shame of like, but this is where I should be. I should be body positive. Why am I not body positive? Right. And so I always really love to break that down and say like, you know what, I feel like personally body positivity falls on the spectrum side of all in, whereas hating on our bodies falls on the other end of the spectrum of all in as well. What if we were to embody the middle of like body neutrality, where we talk about some days you're going to feel fabulous and like that's awesome, rock it. Some days maybe you're not, and like you don't necessarily have to say like, oh, I hate myself and I hate my body and I hate this body part, but you can recognize like, today I'm just not feeling myself. I'm not feeling as fabulous as I'd like
Mhm.
to feel. I'm just not feeling comfortable in like these clothes today. Like you can operate from recognizing a disconnect and feeling the way you want to feel without it being something shameful. I find
Mm-hmm.
that body positivity is very sometimes unattainable to always. And if people are out there who can operate from that place, like that's amazing. I love that for you. But I think most of us, I don't feel that that is reasonable to expect of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right, like body positivity is, like it's an ideal. I don't think it can quite be achieved in the society that we live in, and that like not everybody is going to buy into that. And I also think there's a lot of like misconceptions into like what body positivity is. And I love that you brought up like body neutrality because that you're right. Like that is our body's a body that like it changes, it grows, it
Mm-hmm.
shrinks. It's not meant to look the same as it did 20 years ago when I was a teenager. My body is meant to grow. That's what body neutrality is. And I think existing in the body that you're currently in is and like just acknowledging it is body
Mm-hmm.
neutrality. Like what I
Yeah.
said earlier about too is like let's talk more about like what our bodies can do for us rather
Mm-hmm.
than what our bodies look like.
Yeah.
I think just taking the focus
Absolutely.
away from what our bodies look like and into, wow, look at, I can go for a bike ride for 10 miles without stopping. I can go run a 5K. I can lift some weights. I can do some yoga. I can walk my dogs every day. Like whatever you decide to do with your
Mm-hmm.
body and how you choose to celebrate all the things that it does for you on a day-to-day basis. I think that is body neutrality and in my opinion body positivity because you're saying positive things about your body
Yeah.
no matter what size or shape it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really big topic. I will get off of my
Mm-hmm.
soapbox for a moment.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important. And like that's one of the things that comes up a lot is because we're in this like health and wellness kind of state we're operating. Most of us on social media are operating from, that tends to be a thing, right? Like pushing this body positivity as like the ideal. And like it is kind of an ideal. It's really cool. And it's awesome if we are able to embody, but if we're not, it can also bring about more shame, more guilt,
Mhm.
more icks, and
Exactly.
that's exactly what we're trying to move away from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, let's kind of wrap up. As our last question, we really love to ask our guests if you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, and this could be anything related to our topic or completely unrelated, what would this piece of advice be?
Okay, so I went to college at UT Dallas. And so I was in my second year. I was really young. So I had just turned 18, started my sophomore year. And I think that was the year where I kind of sort of knew that I wasn't quite cut out to be pre-med, but I kept trying to just like do organic chemistry and do
Oof.
these physics classes and do all these classes that just kept like I didn't fail anything, but I just kept getting really bad grades in them. And so, like, thinking back to that, I was like, you know what? I think I would tell my 18-year-old self to, like, trust your gut. Like, if it
Mm-hmm.
feels weird, it is.
Yeah.
Mm,
And if it feels wrong, it is.
Yeah.
love
It's
that.
just, and I think I'll just leave it at that. Is it if it feels weird, it is.
Yeah. Trust your gut.
Yes,
That's
trust.
that's a good piece of advice for sure.
Always here for trusting our inner wisdom. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners or with us that you didn't get a chance to share earlier?
I don't think so. I think just thank you for anyone that is listening, and thank you for everyone for sticking around and listening to
Yes.
the podcast. And thank you guys for having me on
Yes.
and letting me ramble about my topic and
Yes.
my research interests. And yeah, there's like so much more I could talk about, but
Yeah.
I know we've already gone on so much. So
Thank you for reaching out to us. We felt honored that you reference one of our episodes in your with your students, which is really nice.
Yeah, what an
yeah.
honor. Love that.
Yes. Can I share the backstory to our
Yes.
listeners
Yes,
here?
please.
Yeah, so I don't remember when it was it like a year-ish ago, maybe like a
Yeah.
year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking this class in my PhD program where we had to teach a lesson every week to our classmates, and then our classmates would sort of like evaluate us on like our teaching abilities and stuff. So part of like us teaching a class is we had to assign homework to our classmates to have read before. But we were encouraged to not just do like readings, to do like videos or podcasts and all these things. And I knew that in season one, you guys did the alphabet, and E in season one was also eating related things. So I assigned E to my classmates to listen to. And then we talked about it, your episode in that one. So that was
Wow.
really fun. And this is, of course, like before we all knew each other. I then had reached out to you guys on Instagram, which because I needed to cite you in my APA references, and APA
Thank you.
requires that I put in first and last name, which is silly
Yeah.
because it was a podcast. I felt like I should have just been able to put the podcast name, but I was like, "Can I get your last name? I swear I'm not a weirdo on the internet."
No, it was such an honor. Thank you
And what a
for,
full circle moment now to
yeah,
be doing this
you're
with
the
you
guest.
for E.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes. Thank you so much.
from season 1 to season 3.
I love that.
Yeah, that's pretty
That's
cool.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for, listening to that episode and then having us be a part of your, like, wow, amazing, such an honor.
Such an
And then
honor.
now for
Yeah.
joining us to keep talking to us about it, educating us. I feel like I learned a lot. And
Me too.
also, I hope our listeners who've stuck with us this long have learned a lot too. We appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, I'll wrap this up. So, our amazing listeners out there, we appreciate you being here. If anything resonated with you today, we would love to hear from you, your feedback, your thoughts. You can reach us at our email, which is talksouthasiantome@gmail.com, or any social platform. Our handle is at talksouthasiantome.